Oh. Oh. Why is this thing shut? Jordan, are you watching my stream?
Yes. Man, you need to like cock the gun and end it, by the way. How long have you had this on?
That entire last run that I just did where I was like, remember I was like, oh, my damage feels low, but I was still one-shotting everything. I was still one-shotting acolytes.
Yeah, is there some kind of problem here?
Oh
You were
my
you just had your inhibitor rings
god.
on.
I had a missing mod and I had a fucking extinguish key. I need to clip this. Hello and welcome to the Warframe tier list. Today we'll be going over Mag, and I apologize for this video being one day late. I have literally lost sleep over trying to make this Warframe work to a level that I was happy with. Now let's begin, first things first, with the build. So with Mag, there is a lot of different things you can do with her build. First off, Mag is one of the very few Warframes in the game where you can make an argument for not using a helmet ability. This is one example of a build without using a helmet ability. Counterpulse is extremely useful as it is a hard CC that even works versus Eximus and enemies that have the Overguard status effect. This is very useful as I found Mag's survivability to be on the lower end. As you can see, I will unpause these Eximus. They're all shooting at me, and then once I use Counterpulse, they're all hard CC'd. This does wonders for her survivability, and in my opinion, is almost a must. There are a couple different things you could do here, such as you could drop Arcane Aegis, as this is a flex slot. This was just another thing I slotted for survivability, but you could slot something like Arcane Steadfast for energy sustain, or you could slot Arcane Energize for energy sustain. Either one of these will allow you to max out your fleeting expertise and then drop Streamline, and now you have an open mod slot for anything that you happen to want. As for the second build, this build is dropping her third ability, which again, is kind of a throw because you are losing a hard CC, and again, like I think that she kind of struggles in the survivability department. So losing Counterpulse is really bad, but it does work. Greedy Pool helps with sustain. Again, Arcane Aegis can be replaced with whatever you want. As for the final build, and this is the build I preferred, it is just a Gloom build, and there are a lot of things that you can do with the Gloom build. First off, you can see that I'm running Arcane Steadfast, but with Archon shards, you can easily drop Arcane Steadfast and slot Arcane Avenger for 45% flat crit and run Combat Discipline over Growing Power. Even if you don't run Archon shards, if you choose to subsume over her 2 instead of her 1, you can then drop Magnetized Discharge and then slot Streamline back in its place. And now you can just get rid of Steadfast and run Avenger and Combat Discipline even without Archon shards. This is extremely useful as her main weapons are the Archoplasmor, which struggles to get over 100% crit chance for Hunter munitions, which it desperately needs to kill enemies in the later levels. With Arcane Avenger, you now have 120% crit. Oh, you'll have like 112. I just have Riven giving me some extra crit chance. This Riven is just a Toxin mod supplement if you have a Heat Archoplasmor, or a Fire Rate supplement if you have a Toxin Archoplasmor. I would highly suggest having a Toxic Archoplasmor. So having access to Arcane Avenger is very useful, and being able to use Gloom, which then amplifies all of the CC from the rest of your augments like Counterpulse, Fracturing Crush, and Magnetized Discharge if you choose to subsume over her pool. The CC is absolutely amazing, and your survivability, it literally makes you feel like you're playing the game on God mode. Now, as for other options that I previously mentioned briefly, you can choose to subsume Gloom over any of her first 3 abilities. They all work. You can easily subsume over her third ability Polarize, as Gloom plus Magnetized Discharge is more than enough survivability just to keep yourself alive. However, if you just want maximum survivability, I would suggest subsuming over her first ability Pull in favor of Magnetize and Polarize. Stacking Counterpulse with Magnetize Discharge, just again, it makes you invincible. You could also subsume over her second ability Magnetize, and I'll be honest here, this is actually the ability that I like subsuming over the most. It's just I don't really recommend it, even though it's my preferred build, just because I feel like her second ability is Mag's most iconic ability, so it just felt kind of wrong subsuming it off and just not using it. But I don't know. I will say subsuming her second ability off in favor of Pool was my favorite build. So again, like you can just play with testing Gloom over Pool, over her second ability Magnetize, or subsuming it over Polarize. All three work well. One benefit to running Pull, even though her second ability Magnetize already like soft sucks on enemies, is because I need to pause them. Is because you'll notice when you use Magnetize, the enemies get pulled in pretty quickly, but they get pulled in slower whenever they're affected by the Gloom Snare. But for some reason, her first ability Pull isn't affected by Gloom Snare, so you just pull them in at full speed even with Gloom. So keeping Pull while you're running Gloom is very beneficial because you, instead of just like using Magnetize on the enemies and shooting into the bubble, you can just pull them in and just shoot them outright and you'll kill them. Now, as for the weapon loadout, because that is it for the builds, I already previously mentioned the Archoplasmor. Another primary that works well is the Paris Prime with the Incarnate form with a build similar to one of these. The Riven is just a crit chance supplement mod on the Slash build, and on this build it is just it just exists. If you don't have a Riven, you could either put something like Amalgam Serration, or you could put something like a Fire Rate mod like Vile Acceleration. I personally do not suggest the Paris, as I felt it kind of awkward to build up, which might sound kind of hypocritical because, as for secondaries, if you choose to not use the Paris or the Archoplasmor or any of the other couple weapons that work well with her second ability Magnetize, I would highly suggest using the Miter, as Mag gets hard countered by nullifiers, so using the Miter to be able to pop nullifier bubbles instantly makes her a lot more comfortable to play. When you do this, you can now use the new Lex Prime with the Incarnate form, assuming you have it, and this thing just shreds. In fact, I did a run where I accidentally had the Extinguished Dragon Key equipped, which lowers your damage by I think like 75%, 50%, I don't know the number. Point is, the Extinguished Dragon Key just completely neuters your damage, and I was completely fine. I kind of noticed I was doing less damage, but I was still one-shotting everything. Like, the new Lex is insane, and it works wonders with Mag's second ability Magnetize. And since it's a secondary slot, again, it opens up your primary to use the Miter to counter the Nullify bubbles, just so then, like, you're not getting cringed down by them. As to the melee, it's just a Praetos for the parkour velocity and sprint speed and slide. Focus schools for on the Gloom build, I suggest Madurai, and for any build not using Gloom, I suggest Zenric. Zenric for Energy Pulse for more energy sustain, and Wellspring for energy sustain. If you don't need energy sustain for whatever reason, and you're not running Gloom, you can still just run Madurai anyway. The reason why you want run Madurai on Gloom no matter what is because Zenric doesn't work, as all of its passives are energy over time, and with channeled abilities, energy over time effects are disabled. Last but not least, it is just a cat with a standard Panzer build with the synth bonds equipped. Now moving on to the rankings, we're discussing Mag in relation to 4 separate topics. Firstly, her KPM, secondly, her survivability, thirdly, her viability, and finally, how fun she is to play. All of this data is sampled from a 1-hour solo Steel Path bot run with no Spectres, no Archon shards, and of course no on-call. Now let's get into the first topic, Mag's KPM, and in short, Mag has pretty good KPM. Now, it depends on the build you're running, however, as if you sacrifice all of her survivability and you're not using Counterpulse, like let's say that you subsume over her third ability and you just get rid of Counterpulse, and you're not running Gloom, and you play a super aggressive playstyle, or you're just like camping at the end of the hallway pulling enemies in, you do get 120 to 130 KPM, assuming that you also end up in a good tile set regardless, like a good layout with good spawns. You can get 130-ish KPM. Now that's all well and good, and it also has insanely high scaling, thanks to her second ability taking damage and multiplying it, giving you a damage buff, and also having access to an easy armor strip. This allows her to scale to level cap to ease, which isn't entirely relevant, but it still is a factor into their KPM. Now, if you run one of the more durable builds, which again is what I would highly suggest, as I believe that Mag has pretty bad survivability outside of running like every single one of her augments, you're looking at roughly 90 to 100 KPM, which that is enough to be able to go without really having to pick up life support. You will never have to worry about life support. It is a bit on the lower side, but it's not terrible, and again, it also still has scaling potential as you still have easy access to an armor strip and the damage multiplier of her second ability. All in all, I will give her an S- rank for her KPM, and it is mostly carried by the fact that she has an innate armor strip and easy access to a suck and a damage multiplier. Now, let's move on to the second topic, her survivability, and this is where I believe that she suffers a lot. So I've made it pretty clear that I think that her survivability is trash. That doesn't mean that you can't survive as her, though. If you run one of the first two builds, like the Nourish build or the No Augment build, like you can do a 1 hour run without dying. It is extremely hard, I found, but you can do it. I personally did not like it. I was struggling a lot. I would just randomly fall over and die 40 to 50 minutes in, and the reason why is because you're playing her as a shield gate frame, and you're kind of locked into playing her as a shield gate frame too. Like, you can't really run a tank build. Trust me, I tried. And honestly, you know what? If somebody has a 1 hour tank mag build that isn't using Archon shards that can do a 1 hour solo mot, please link it to me and I will test it out personally. But I tried it and I could not survive past like 10 minutes as her. Like, oh my god, I wanted to die. So, so there's all of that. But then if you run the Gloom build and you run Magnetized Discharge, which is a hard CC that also strips enemies' weapons from them, and you also stack that with Gloom plus Counterpulse, which is another hard CC, and both of those work on Eximus, by the way. Like, Magnetized Discharge strips Eximus units of their gun. Counterpulse hard CCs Eximus for like 4 seconds. Both of them in conjunction with each other, especially with Gloom, which makes both of their CCs get multiplied for the duration. Like, her survivability is absolutely insane. Like, it genuinely feels like you're cheating when you're playing with Gloom plus her 2 augment and her 3 augment. The problem is, it's mostly carried by Gloom, and I've kind of made a statement in the past where if the only way for your frame to have decent survivability is Gloom, it's kind of a self-call-out that your frame has poor survivability. Not only that, but you still have to run multiple augments and Gloom just for her survivability to work. Like, you take 1 away and you instantly feel your survivability drop. You take 2 away and you're back to square one of like fighting for your life. So her survivability, in my opinion, is very bad. I will give it a B-, and even that I think is being generous. Now, I say B-, but again, keep in mind, with the Gloom build and all of the augments, she is very durable. It's just you have to run so much to get that durability, which is why the rating is low. Now, moving on to the third topic, her viability, and I actually think she's decently viable. Now, she's nothing spectacular if you're just running through a normal mission. In fact, I would argue that she's probably one of the worst frames, like, not saying like bottom 10, but probably bottom 25 whenever it comes to just running capture missions, rescue missions, exterminates, etc., etc. However, in survival, I've already made it clear she has very good scaling in survival. Like, she's perfectly fine there. And excavation, she's also really good with the Gloom build. The reason for this is because excavation missions are probably the hardest game mode in the entire game to do a proper endurance run on without just having the excavator die over and over again. And Mag with the Gloom build would be a very, very good Warframe to like have as like a 3rd or 4th unit. The reason is because, well, Gloom is already really good for CC, as everybody should know, but then her second augment also just takes enemies' guns away from them, so they can't shoot the excavators, so now you only have to worry about Eximus, like walking up, like Blitz Eximus in particular, walking up and using their stupid attack that one-shots everything. But Then you also have Counterpulse, which hard CCs even the Blitz Eximus. Like, she is very good for defensive gameplay. For like excavation, defense, whatever. So she's really good in survival. She's really good in excavation. She's really good in defense, though in defense it's kind of a stretch because she's also simultaneously making the waves take longer. So it's like that one's a bit of a stretch. And she's also pretty decent in disruption. I don't actually think she's amazing in disruption. I know you can make her work, but I personally just don't really like her there. I have done not a level cap, but I've done like a 30-ish round disruption as mag, and it wasn't terrible, but it wasn't amazing. So, all in all, I think she's good in the game modes that matter more, but she is subpar in just like everyday missions, so I would give her like an average of a B rank for her viability, but again, she's like really, really nice for excavation and survival. Now, moving on to the final topic of is mag fun to play, and I do believe that this is debatable, as I personally don't really like the fact that mag pigeonholes you into using just a couple weapons. Like, yes, you could use some meme weapons that technically work on her in quotation marks, like the Penta, but they're kind of just gimmick builds that at the end of the day are just, they're fun for 5 seconds, then after that they're not. And that's kind of mag in a nutshell. Her entire existence is just a gimmick. I think she's fun if you just play her like once, like 1 or 2 days a month, and then you just forget about her for a month and you're like, oh, you know what, I'll play mag, that sounds fun, and then like you get your fix of mag and then you move on. But I really couldn't imagine myself just sitting down and playing mag for like a week straight. And well, actually I could. I have for the last week, and I've honestly, it's been like miserable. So I could imagine it, and it's been horrible. But that being said, I could see myself playing her again for like a day or two, then just not playing her for a while, picking her back up for a day or two, and I could see some enjoyment in that, as she is a very unique frame in how she plays. So I don't know. It's kind of a weird thing where she's like unique, so it's like interesting, but then after you play her for a while, it gets stale very quickly. Honestly, I think it just ends up being average because she's unique, but then her unique traits just get stale quickly. So it's like, oh, she's fun, oh, she's boring, oh, she's fun, oh, she's boring again. So I would just give her another average rank of a B. In conclusion, Mag is an A- tier Warframe who can be very strong and is also very durable under the right circumstances. However, she suffers from one major problem, and that is her entire existence is a gimmick. Super thick hitbox, so it would bounce before it would hit it, but I'll test real quick. Oh, I love this bug. I love the bug where you press your 2 and it doesn't fucking work.